Hey, welcome to this edition of Snowmobiler Television. On this week's show, we've got SkiDoo's MXZ 850 warming up for first burn. Plus, we're in the shop working on our Project RMK again. We also hit the trails around New Liskeard, Ontario, and we've got a story about a vintage race sled that's going back home. This is going to be a busy show, so you better stick around.
STV is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Polaris Snowmobiles, together we are born for more. Ford F-Series, Canada's best-selling line of trucks for 53 years. Tough, smart, capable.
Temiskaming Shores is a snowmobiling hub to some of the best trails in Ontario. Whether you're passing through or you're using this place as a destination, it really does have it all. And that ain't no bull. I mean, seriously, I'd never steer you wrong. It's getting utterly ridiculous now. Better hoof it out of here.
Being a hotel operator here in Temiskaming Shores is absolutely fantastic. Of course, we've got a long season. We always start in January and run right through till March. And if we're lucky, April. Some people call that lucky. We definitely call it lucky. But snowmobiling is a very important part of our business. Large customer base. And we're centrally located, so it's a great spot. The riders we see up here is actually, there's a varying degree. We've got some, we call them the weekend warriors, that they're coming from, you know, a 4-hour drive from southern Ontario. They're riding up here, they're getting in on Friday night, they're putting in a full day Saturday. Typically they'll ride most of the day on Sunday, so we call those our weekend warriors. We see a lot of those, but we also see a lot of, in this area, because you can ride for 2 or 3 days and not be on the same trail, we also see a lot of husbands and wives. And in families. March break is a very popular spot in March because, of course, we're guaranteed snow here in March. So we see families. So we really do see a mix. It's not your typical, you know, guys location. It's a mix of families. It's a mix of tours. Typical riding group, we do see some large groups, but I would say probably on average between 4 and 8 is our typical group. Saddlebag touring is really important here because we are in the hub, so we're centrally located. So we're a day's ride from North Bay, we're a day's ride from Sudbury, we're a day's ride to Cochrane and Timmins. So this really is the hub. So whether you're coming from southern Ontario and you start south, you stop here for the day and then you head further on. We're also the start of the Gold Rush Tour. So the Gold Rush Tour encompasses Cochrane, Timmins, Elk Lake, Galganda, and we are the starting point for the Gold Rush Tour, which has been in existence for quite a while. It was basically the second tour in Ontario that was created as far as a loop tour. And it's been very popular over the last probably 15 years, and it continues to be one of our greatest selling features is the Gold Rush Tour. Moose Loop is a very popular loop, and that's what we call one of our local loops. So we have several local loops in here, and like I mentioned before, is when you're staying in our area, you can ride for 2 or 3 days and not be on the same trails every day, which, I mean, all riders love that. So the Moose Loop is one of our most popular day loops for our area. Most of the people in our area are snowmobilers, ATV riders. We appreciate the outdoors. We live in Northern Ontario. Lake Temiskaming, the waterfront inn is right on Lake Temiskaming. It's right in our backyard. We see the lake every day. It really is, you know, we're outdoor people and we really do love snowmobiling. That's what it comes down to.
We're in an area that's often referred to as the Triangle. Timmins, Sudbury, North Bay, and New Liskeard's on the edge of that, being on Highway 11, the Trans-Canada Highway. So people come here from all over Canada, North America to snowmobile. They either arrive by truck and base themselves out of here, or they can day trip. We're an easy day's ride from North Bay, from Sudbury, from Timmins. So it really is a central location. And as a result of that, we have lots of hotel rooms. Our trails are probably some of the most diverse in the area. We've got the snowmobile trails just north of New Liskeard that are farm fields, so you get the nice flat rolling fields with lots of gullies that are fun to pass through. Right next door to it, we've got the Canadian Shield, so we've got the rocky, twisty stuff. You get out further by Elk Lake, they're sand flats, so you're running through the forest, but nice swooping wide trails. Most of our trails are groomed about 18 feet wide, so they're excellent size, and you can travel a good distance in the day without having to go really, really fast to do it. So my wife rides with us all the time, and a couple of years ago she mentioned, boy, it'd be nice if there was better spots to go to the bathroom on the trail. So I was up in Cochrane, saw their warm-up shacks, toilets, and I thought that's perfect for here. So we got some funding, and last year we put one heated bathroom on the trail, and this year we added 2 more unheated bathrooms. So there's places for the ladies and children, and even the men, to go to the bathroom on the trail, because nothing like a ruined ride when you got to go to the bathroom and there's nowhere to go.
The City of Timiskaming Shores was created in 2004 by the amalgamation of the communities of Haileybury, New Liskeard, and Diamond Township, and created a community of about 10,000 people, and it's enabled the communities to thrive due to the stronger base of people that we have in the community. Well, in the wintertime, snowmobiling is such a driver for this community. We realize thousands of snowmobiles over the months of winter, and it keeps our tourism businesses alive for that season when there's little other business through this area, so we thrive on that. We know that winter tourism here, snowmobiling is sort of the #1 winter tourism activity. It impacts all aspects of the community, including the restaurants, the gas stations, all the stores. Notice that they get extra folks here in the wintertime on snowmobiles, so it's something that we realize is a huge benefit to our community.
First Burn is brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts.
Sled names from the most recent snowmobile history, like Indy, ZRT, and VMAX, have come and gone, and in some cases come back again. But there's one name that's been there throughout these changes, and it's SkiDoo's MXZ. Okay, I know MXZ, MXZ, I'm a Canadian, I should be saying Z, but I mean, it is what it is, and I always call these things MXZs or Mach Zs in the day. At the end of the day, it's a Z or Z, it's just a backwards too. The MX part of the name began in 1981 with the MX Blizzard, which had one of the first long travel suspensions in snowmobile history. Later in the timeline, 1993 in fact, SkiDoo added a Z to the Formula MX to improve its top-of-the-line performance image right alongside the Mach Z. Both these sleds were in the brand new, lighter weight F2000 chassis. This part of snowmobile history was my history. I mean, these sleds were my dream rides when the MXZ and Mach Z were brand new on showroom floors, not to mention the Indies and the Zerts and the VMAX 4s. And when those names went away over the years, I may have shed a tear or two, but at least the MXZ, it stuck around. Now, I might take some flack for implying that these machines are somehow vintage or historical, but I didn't grow up with Olympics on the showroom floor either. Anyhow, back to the Z. Our SkiDoo ride for the 2020 model year is the 850X package, which we ordered in the spring with the standard 1.25-inch ripsaw track for more speed. We also opted out of the adjustment package, so no pilot skis or QAS on the running boards. What the X package does get us is more adjustment in the rear suspension and spring rates just a little softer than an XRS. The TNT model is stellar and should really be considered the beginning of the lineup over the Sport. The TNT has preload adjustable springs only without dampening adjustable shocks. However, the Boffins at SkiDoo have done a great job making this sled a joy to ride as is. It's precise, predictable, comfy, and good looking. The only reason we opted for the X package was for the additional suspension adjustability and spring rate. I should also say that when really pushing hard on the rough stuff, we could ride through the suspension on the TNT. And comparing it and the X package back to back, you can definitely tell the X will take more abuse. So why not an XRS? Well, we've had those the last 2 years, and honestly, I think they were too much. Great on whooped out trails, but just too harsh everywhere else. We also found the sled sat too high for where and how we rode, so the X package was the best choice for us. And when I say us, I mean me, because this nuclear banana is going to spend the winter in my trailer. And knowing that I'll be spending a bunch of time on this machine, I will most certainly add a bit of windshield above the gauge pod for more wind chill protection. But other than that, that's the only complaint I have about the MXZX. Everything else falls into place for my riding style with this machine. I mean, I really like the way you can hang off the side in a corner, you can get up on the bars easy when you need to, and then without the QAS on the running boards, I feel I got more room to move my feet around when I want to as well. And then for the occasional deep snow encounter, the 1.25" track will do a decent job keeping up forward momentum, especially being motivated by the 850 E-Tech engine. With all the choices in the MXZ line, it all goes back to really figuring out what type of rider you are and making buying decisions based on this rather than on image or simply buying the most expensive sled in the lineup. There is the perfect MXZ with your name on it. You just might have to order it. I guess you could say with all the options available within the MXZ lineup that I've managed to build my perfect dream sled? I don't know, but one thing's for sure, that this 2020 MXZ X package will continue to build on the history that started for me in '93, when I was 5. After day one on the project sled here, we pretty much got this thing ready for reassembly. After just a little bit of cleanup and some vinyl removal. 10-15 minutes it'll be ready to go. Anyways, when we do get to reassembly, the very first thing we're gonna put on this bad boy is a brand new track from Camso.
Pascal, we've got a project coming up that's a little bit different. It's a Polaris RMK that we're gonna build for Eastern riding, not Western riding. What type of track do you think Camso has that might fit that type of description?
I'd probably go with the Peak 2.5. It's a track that will be able to get you through like trail riding, as it's really stable. It's got good side hilling when you're off trail. The center section is softer to give you the lift, but you got, the side which are stiffer, to make sure that you do have the ability to brake correctly when you're going down a hill, because no matter how high you go or in which situation, you always need to be able to stop. So that's the reason why I'd go with the Peak 2.5.
Yeah, because we're probably going to spend a little bit more time on the trail than a typical mountain sled would spend. Now, what kind of performance are we going to see there, do you think?
Because it's stiffer on the side, it's also a little heavier, so a little less track speed versus like a true mountain track. But I mean, it's a track that will try to cover pretty much any aspect of the conditions you might encounter. We do, use things we've learned for the trail especially based on the Cobra track. I mean, that's a trail track, but that does really good off trail. So there's features that we got on there and we found that were really good off trail that we're using on some other tracks we're making. So that's why, like the folding back of like the profile a little bit, we found that on the Cobra and we reused that in the center section of the peak track because it's got its purpose.
I'm pretty excited about the Peak 2.5. That's because this track is going to be a real key component to the project sled here. I'm looking forward to trying it on the snow, actually. Just kind of wish that the sled would go back together as quickly as it came apart. Ugh, there's a lot of work here. This thing is scuzzy. SkiDoo started racing SkiDoos, well, pretty much right after the second SkiDoo was built, and they've been racing these things ever since. Now, this racing history has had a huge impact on the sleds that we ride today, but this influence was probably at its greatest back in the late 70s. At the time, Bobby Donahue was one of SkiDoo's factory riders on his 1978 440 Supermod. Now, here's a story about Donahue, his sled, and how he's recently reconnected with it. We first ran across this sled a few years ago at the Couchard Classic in Dorset, Ontario, and Dave Baldwin, who owned the machine at the time.
These two 440s are 2 of 12 that were manufactured. One was raced by Bobby Donahue out of Wisconsin Rapids, Minnesota, and the other sled was raced by Doug Hayes out of Camden, Wisconsin. Both factory supermod racers. This sled of Bobby Donahue's was raced at Alexandria and again at West Yellowstone. And we brought them back to life, and they're a great part of snowmobile race history, especially for SkiDoo factory racers. And I'm hoping everybody is enjoying them at the show.
A good friend of mine, his name's Dave Baldwin, was a collector. Big time collector, super detail oriented guy. I seen some of his sleds and I was like, jealous. Nice stuff. Documented race sleds. And for some reason, he wanted to get out of collecting. And he approached me and he was having a tough time getting out of it. And he said, I'll only sell if someone buys everything. One shot deal, I want everything. And this sled and the number 8 Doug Hayes sled was part of the collection. So they were kind of the pinnacle of the collection, let's say. But anyways, the story on this one is Bobby Donahue is a BRP dealer in Minnesota. And we were talking one day at a dealer meeting and I said, I have your old sled. And then it was pretty much a short time after that, he got a hold of me and said, hey, you still got that sled? Yep. Do you want to sell it? Nope. Come on. I said, I don't want to sell it. So I didn't buy them to sell them, I bought them to keep them together. So, we got talking, and I thought, if there's one person in the world that really should have it, it's the guy that raced it.
This is a pretty cool day for me, and the reason for it is back 41 years ago. This is a sled that I raced when I was a factory driver for SkiDoo in Belcourt, Quebec. And what made it really kind of a strange thing is I was a factory Yamaha driver prior to racing for SkiDoo. And for me to be growing up with my dad being a Yamaha dealer and a motor ski dealer, to grow up with those brands and now to, so to speak, go drive a competitor's machine. And I think I was like 19 years old at the time. It was a pretty tough thing to do as a young man, And I'm not so sure my dad was all that enamored with the idea, but he went along with it. And my good friend and my mentor, Dick Trickle, and my dad both said that, bottom line to it is, if SkiDoo thinks you're worth that much money and Yamaha doesn't, you better ride that darn yellow SkiDoo. So I did. This particular sled in 1978 in the World's Championship race in Eagle River, Wisconsin, almost won the World's Championship in my very first try on this number 11. And it was a 15-lap feature race back then, and factory players driver Steve Thorson had a big lead in the race, and I kept moving up through the ranks, and I was up to 4th, I was up to 3rd, I got up to 2nd. And with about 5 laps to go, I was in second place and I was closing in on him and probably got it down to maybe 3-4 sled lengths and ended up blowing about with like a lap and a half to go. And it's like, man, I can't believe this just happened, you know? So believe it or not, running second place, a lap and a half to go, threw the hood off, threw the clutch guard off, burned my hands all to a pulp changing that belt, because if it was hot enough to blow, you can imagine how warm those clutches were. And they didn't have cool tools to change belts in those days. Just big old mean dad hands is all they had. And we put the belt on and threw the hood on, threw the clutch guard over the fence. You know, probably some spectator today has probably still got it in their garage someplace. And we went on and finished 4th. So not a bad result at the end of it, but could have been close. This is a big part of my life. It's really cool. It's nice to be united with it again. It's a part of history that I'm taking back home with me.
Hey, thanks for hanging with us this week on STV. Until next time, keep the skis between the trees.
STV has been brought to you by Ultimix Belts. Performance driven, performance proven. CKX. Wear your passion. On Snow Magazine. For snowmobilers from snowmobilers.
Hey, welcome to the YouTube comment of the day. And today's comment comes from Donahue Rice. And he says, I've never felt brake fade on a sled. Going into the corner, you tap the brakes like ABS, point and shoot for the next corner, bang, bang, tap, tap. The brakes scrubbing off just enough speed to corner like an Indy car. And he continues to say, I've never had them fade driving like that in 30 years or replace pads in over 20,000 miles on a sled. Well, Donahue, I don't want to say you're probably not riding fast enough, but you might not be riding fast enough. Send us in another comment when you finally scrub off a pair. Oh, and by the way, a 613 do, love what you're saying, brother.